Today is Tuesday, July 28th, 2026, and today is National Milk Chocolate Day. I don't know who first decided chocolate needed to be improved by adding milk, but I'm glad they did. Some inventions make headlines. Others just quietly make life a little better. And sometimes the things that become part of our everyday life just started out sounding like pretty strange ideas. That turned out to be a fitting way to begin today's journey. First, we'll meet a piano player who shocked millions of television viewers and helped change American music forever. Then we'll discover how a simple handprint on a contract helped lay the foundation for modern forensic science. And finally, we'll look at one of the strangest aviation accidents in American history, when a military bomber somehow crashed into the Empire State Building. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and your reasonably calm guide through humanity's long history of strange decisions. By 1957, parents across America were becoming convinced that rock and roll was corrupting an entire generation. Teenagers couldn't get enough of it. Parents often wished it would disappear. Few performers represented that divide better than Jerry Lee Lewis. Lewis didn't simply play the piano. He attacked it. He pounded the keys, stood while he played, kicked the piano bench out of the way, and performed with an energy that audiences had rarely seen before. Watching him felt less like attending a concert and more like trying to hang on during a tornado. On July 28, 1957, that tornado rolled directly into American living rooms. Jerry Lee Lewis appeared on The Steve Allen Show, one of the country's most popular television programs. Television in the 1950s was still viewed as something respectable that entire families gathered around after dinner. Variety shows were polished. Performers wore suits. Parents expected wholesome entertainment. Then, Jerry Lee Lewis sat down at the piano. Within moments, the polished television performance became pure rock and roll. His hands flew across the keyboard. His body seemed to bounce with every note. His energy practically exploded through the television screen. Some viewers loved every second. Others thought it was outrageous. But everyone was talking about it the next day. Looking back, it's easy to forget how controversial rock and roll once seemed. Today, performances like that barely raise an eyebrow. But in 1957, millions of Americans were watching a cultural shift happen in real time. It's funny how something unfamiliar can seem almost threatening at first, until eventually it becomes completely ordinary. That same thing happened with another idea that once seemed almost impossible. Imagine trying to solve a crime in the mid-1800s. There was no DNA, no surveillance cameras, no computerized databases. If investigators couldn't find a witness or catch someone in the act, many crimes simply stayed unsolved. Then people began noticing something curious. The tiny ridges on our fingertips weren't just random patterns. They were unique. On July 28, 1858, British official William James Herschel asked a local contractor in India to press his hand into ink and leave an impression on a contract. Herschel's goal wasn't to invent forensic science. He simply wanted to make sure the man couldn't later deny signing the agreement. Over time, Herschel noticed something remarkable. The fingerprints never changed. Every person had their own unique pattern. What began as a practical way to prevent fraud gradually became one of the foundations of modern identification. Years later, researchers expanded on Herschel's observations. Police departments began using fingerprints to identify suspects. Eventually, fingerprint evidence became one of the most recognizable tools in criminal investigations anywhere in the world. Today, nobody thinks twice about hearing that detectives found fingerprints at a crime scene. But every single technology has a beginning. Sometimes it starts with a wild piano performance that changes popular culture. And sometimes it starts with nothing more than an ink-covered hand pressed into a piece of paper. The idea that one tiny fingerprint could identify a single person among billions seems perfectly normal today. But in 1945, another event reminded people that sometimes the most unbelievable things really do happen. Picture yourself standing on a New York City street on the morning of July 28, 1945. It's a Saturday. The Empire State Building has already become one of the most recognizable buildings on Earth. Thousands of people are heading to work, sightseeing, or simply enjoying another summer morning. Then, out of the thick fog, an airplane appears. A U.S. Army Air Force's B-25 Mitchell bomber, flying in poor visibility, had become disoriented over Manhattan. At 9:40 that morning, a bomber slammed into the north side of the Empire State Building between the 78th and 80th floors. The explosion ripped a massive hole in the building. Burning aviation fuel poured through office windows. One engine shot completely through the building and landed on the roof of a nearby structure. Another plunged down an elevator shaft. 14 people lost their lives, including the 3 crew members aboard the aircraft. One of the most remarkable stories involved elevator operator Betty Lou Oliver. The impact left her badly injured on the 80th floor. Rescue workers placed her inside an elevator to send her down for medical treatment. Then, disaster struck again. The crash had severed the elevator cables. The elevator plunged nearly 75 stories toward the ground. Amazingly, Betty Lou Oliver survived. The tangled cables beneath the elevator combined with compressed air inside the shaft helped cushion the fall. To this day, she still holds the Guinness World Record for surviving the longest elevator fall. Even more astonishing, the Empire State Building itself remained structurally sound. The damage was extensive, but the building reopened just 2 days later. It's one of those moments that almost sounds fictional until you realize every part of it really happened. Stories like today's are a reminder that history rarely moves in a straight line. One moment, a musician changes culture simply by refusing to sit still at a piano. Another, an ink-covered hand helps lay the foundation for modern forensic science. Then a tragic accident reveals just how remarkably well an iconic building and some incredibly resilient people could endear the unimaginable. Along the way, we also celebrate the birthday of Beatrix Potter, born on July 28, 1866. Long before Peter Rabbit became one of the most beloved storybook characters, Potter spent countless hours observing nature. She carefully sketched animals, studied plants and fungi, and developed an eye for detail that brought her illustrations to life. When publishers initially rejected the tale of Peter Rabbit, she printed the book herself. It eventually became an international success, leading to more than 20 children's books and making her one of the most influential authors and illustrators in children's literature. Later in life, Potter devoted much of her fortune to preserving England's Lake District, purchasing thousands of acres of farmland that she eventually left to the National Trust. Because of her, much of that landscape still looks remarkably similar to the countryside that inspired her stories. What struck me today is how often history begins with someone doing something that seems ordinary at the time. Playing a piano, pressing a hand onto a contract, flying what should have been a routine flight, drawing rabbits in a notebook. Nobody involved could have known we'd still be talking about those moments generations later. Anyway, the next time I hear someone dismiss a small moment as no big deal, I'll probably think about today. History has a funny habit of hiding its biggest stories inside moments that seem completely ordinary while they're happening. And that reminds me of something Beatrix Potter once wrote. Believe there is great power silently working all things for good. Behave yourself and never mind the rest. If you'd like to hear more of my work, audiobooks, or other projects I've somehow gotten myself involved in, you can find everything over at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and honestly, thank you for spending a little time being curious with me. I'll see you tomorrow.